close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a river. Not any river, the longest river on Earth, cutting through thousands of kilometers of pale desert. Every summer, without fail, it floods its banks and leaves behind a thin strip of dark, fertile mud. On either side of that mud, nothing. Just sand and rock and silence, stretching to the horizon. That river is the Nile. And along its banks, more than 10,000 years ago, people began to settle. We call the civilization they built ancient Egypt. But before there was a single pharaoh, before there was a single pyramid, there were just people. Farmers and fishermen. Families living in small reed huts near the water. They noticed that the floods came at the same time every year. They built calendars around it. They stored grain. They buried their dead with small objects, tools, beads, a favorite jar, as if they believed something waited on the other side. We call this period the pre-dynastic era. It lasted thousands of years. Dozens of generations. People living full lives whose names we will never know. Around 3100 BCE, roughly 5,000 years ago, something changed. The scattered settlements along the Nile began to consolidate. Two distinct regions emerged, Upper Egypt in the south, with its white crown, and Lower Egypt in the north, near the Great Delta where the Nile fans out into the Mediterranean. And then, according to tradition, a king unified them. His name, in the records that survived, was Narmer. Some historians believe he was also known as Menes. Some believe they were two different people, or the same person remembered under two different names. What we do know is that a carved stone palette, found in 1898, now in the Cairo Museum, shows a king wearing both crowns. On one face, he strikes an enemy. On the other, he walks in procession. It is one of the oldest pieces of historical narrative art ever found. And it is the beginning of what we call the First Dynasty of Egypt. The story that follows, 3,000 years of it, is not a straight line. It rises and falls and fractures and reassembles. It is told in stone and papyrus, in temples and tombs, in the records of administrators and the graffiti of workers. We are still reading it. The first large stone pyramid was built by a pharaoh named Djoser, around 2650 BCE. His architect, a man named Imhotep, stacked flat-roofed rectangular tombs one on top of another, each one smaller than the last. The result was a step pyramid, rising in 6 tiers above the desert plain at Saqqara. It was 62 meters tall. It was the largest stone structure ever built at that point in human history. Imhotep was remarkable. He was not a pharaoh but a commoner who rose through the administration. He designed the pyramid, and he also practiced medicine. Centuries after his death, he was deified, worshipped as a god of wisdom and healing. After Djoser came other kings, and with each generation the pyramids grew more ambitious. Sneferu, the first pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, built 3 pyramids. His second attempt, the bent pyramid at Dahshur, suddenly changes slope partway up. The builders saw cracks forming in the stone and reduced the angle to ease the structural load. His third pyramid succeeded. It is the first true smooth-sided pyramid in history. His son, Khufu, went further. The Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2560 BCE. It stands 138 meters tall today, slightly shorter than when it was built, because the polished white casing stones were stripped away over the centuries for use in other buildings. It contains an estimated 2.5 million stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each. It was the tallest structure built by human hands for nearly 4,000 years. How the pyramid was built remains genuinely uncertain. We have evidence of a construction ramp system found at the quarry in Hatnub in 2018, a staircase system with wooden sleds that could haul enormous stones with fewer workers than previously thought. We have evidence of a well-organized labor force, workers' villages, medical records, bread and beer rations, and graffiti left by work gangs with names like Friends of Khufu. These were not slaves, as popular myth long held. They were paid skilled workers. But the exact sequence of construction, how the internal chambers were planned, how the upper courses were lifted, how the final stones were fitted, we do not fully know. The question is not answered. It may never be. Beside Khafre's pyramid stands the Great Sphinx, carved directly from the bedrock, a lion's body with a human face, 73 meters long and 20 meters tall. Its face is thought to represent Khafre himself, though this too is debated. The later pharaohs of the Old Kingdom built smaller pyramids. Regional governors accumulated power. By around 2160 BCE, the central government had collapsed. Egypt fractured. This period is called the First Intermediate Period, and for about a century, there was no single ruler of the whole Nile Valley. The pyramids stood in the desert, unmaintained, already ancient. Eventually, a family of rulers from Thebes reunified Egypt. Their most significant king, Mentuhotep II, is sometimes called the second founder of Egypt. He ruled for more than 50 years beginning around 2055 BCE, opening what historians call the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is, in some ways, a quieter story. No pyramids as enormous as Giza. But it was a period of great depth. Literature flourished. The tale of Sinuhe is one of the oldest pieces of narrative fiction in the world. It tells the story of a court official who flees Egypt after the death of a pharaoh, lives for years among foreign peoples, and eventually grows old longing for home. He returns. It has a plot. It has character development. Reading it today, it feels almost like a modern novel. They were also writing wisdom literature. One text, the instructions of Amenemhat, reads in places like something a father might write to a son today. Be careful whom you trust. The world is full of unexpected turns. The Egyptians were thinking deeply about how to live well. They were writing it down. They were teaching it to their children. That is its own kind of monument, less visible than a pyramid, but no less real. Trade expanded. Egypt sent expeditions to a land called Punt, probably somewhere along the Horn of Africa, returning with incense trees, gold, and exotic animals. They sent miners into the Sinai Peninsula for turquoise. Then, again, there was fragmentation. This time, the disruption came partly from without. A people the Egyptians called the Hyksos, their name means something like rulers of foreign lands, had been settling in the Nile Delta for generations. Over time they rose to political dominance in the north. They brought with them something the Egyptians had never seen in warfare, the horse-drawn chariot. The Egyptians were shocked. And then, over time, they adapted. A pharaoh named Ahmose drove the Hyksos out around 1550 BCE, reunified the country, and opened the most famous era in all of Egyptian history. This was the Egypt of the great warrior pharaohs. The Egypt of grand temples and golden treasure. Thutmose III campaigned across the ancient Near East in 17 military campaigns. He fought at the Battle of Megiddo, the first battle in history for which we have a detailed account, and extended Egyptian control to the Euphrates River. His stepmother had ruled before him for more than 20 years. Her name was Hatchepsut. Hatshepsut was one of the most successful pharaohs in Egyptian history. She ruled as pharaoh, not as regent, not as queen consort, but as pharaoh, for roughly 21 years. She wore the double crown. She wore the false beard that was the symbol of kingship. She oversaw a massive building program, including a mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari that is still considered one of the finest architectural achievements of the ancient world. She sent a famous trading expedition to Punt. After her death, her name and image were systematically removed from monuments. Statues were smashed. Her cartouche, the oval ring containing a royal name, was chipped away. For centuries, she was erased. We do not know who ordered it or why. There is no document that says. Some historians believe it was Thutmose III, settling an old political score. Others believe it happened much later, by successors who wanted to tidy up a break in the proper succession. The erasure is real. The motive is genuinely unresolved. Several generations later, Amenhotep IV came to the throne and did something no pharaoh before him had ever done. He declared that there was only one god, the Aten, the disk of the sun. He renamed himself Akhenaten. He closed the temples of all the other gods. He moved the capital to a new city he built in the desert, which he called Akhetaten. It was a revolution imposed from above. And it did not survive him. After Akhenaten's death, the old religion was restored. His monuments were torn down. His name was erased. A young boy came to the throne after him. He was probably 9 or 10 years old. His name was changed to Tutankhamun. He died young, in his late teens, and was buried in a small tomb in the Valley of the Kings. He was largely forgotten. In November 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter removed a step from the desert floor in the Valley of the Kings. Then another. Then a staircase leading to a sealed door. On November 26, after 3 weeks of excavation, Carter made a small hole in the sealed inner door and held a candle up to the gap. His patron asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter said, "Yes." Wonderful things. The tomb was intact. Nearly 3,500 years of silence ended. More than 5,000 objects. Gold, jewelry, furniture, a golden mask that has become the most recognized image of ancient Egypt in the modern world. Tutankhamun was a minor king. He ruled for perhaps 10 years and changed little. But his tomb happened to survive, hidden under debris, when so many greater tombs were robbed in antiquity. History is not always preserved in proportion to importance. After the upheaval of the Amarna period, a military family, the Ramessides, took control. The most famous of them was Ramesses II, who came to the throne around 1279 BCE and ruled for 66 years. He built more monuments, erected more statues of himself, and inscribed his name on more surfaces than almost any other pharaoh in history. His most famous military engagement was the Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittite Empire around 1274 BCE. Ramesses was ambushed and surrounded, and by his own account, carved on temple walls across Egypt, he fought his way out through personal valor. The Hittite records describe a somewhat different story. A draw, or even a Hittite victory. What is certain is that neither side won decisively, and the two great powers eventually signed a peace treaty around 1259 BCE. The Treaty of Kadesh is the oldest surviving peace treaty in the world. A copy of it hangs today in the United Nations headquarters in New York. After Ramesses II, the line gradually lost its authority. Around 1200 BCE, the Sea Peoples, raiders from somewhere in the Aegean or Eastern Mediterranean, attacked the Egyptian coast and disrupted trade networks across the region. This was part of the broader Bronze Age collapse. Climate change, drought, internal rebellions, earthquake storms, historians debate the causes endlessly. What is certain is that several great civilizations of the ancient world collapsed within decades of each other. Egypt survived, but it was diminished. The New Kingdom ended. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II invaded Egypt and conquered it. Egypt became a province of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. The Persians ruled Egypt twice, separated by a period of independence. What ended Persian rule was the arrival of a young Macedonian king who had already conquered most of the known world. Alexander the Great arrived in Egypt in 332 BCE. He was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. He visited the oracle of Ammonius at the Siwa oasis, and the oracle declared him to be the son of Ammonius Ra. He founded a city on the Mediterranean coast and named it after himself, Alexandria. Then he left, and never returned. He died in Babylon in 323 BCE, at the age of 32. After Alexander's death, Egypt went to one of his generals, Ptolemy, who declared himself pharaoh in 305 BCE and founded the dynasty that would rule for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemies were Greeks. They spoke Greek. But they were also, strategically, pharaohs. They built temples in the Egyptian style, participated in Egyptian religious ceremonies, and funded the great cult temples at Edfu and Dendera and Philae, temples that survive today as the best preserved in Egypt, precisely because supporting the Egyptian priesthood was politically essential. Alexandria became one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, perhaps the largest collection of written knowledge in antiquity, was established here. Scholars came from across the Mediterranean. Euclid wrote his Elements of Geometry here. Eratosthenes, the librarian, calculated the circumference of the earth with impressive accuracy using the angle of shadows in different cities. How much of the library was destroyed, and when, and by whom, is one of those questions that popular history simplifies and scholars find frustratingly complicated. There was no single dramatic burning. The library declined gradually, through funding cuts, political disruptions, and yes, fires. Julius Caesar accidentally burned part of it in 48 BCE. Parts of the collection may have been damaged later under the Emperor Aurelian, or under Theophilus in the late 4th century, or under the Arab conquest in the 7th. There may have been multiple institutions remembered collectively as the library. We do not know how much was in it at its peak. The loss is real. The story is much messier than the legend. The last of the Ptolemaic rulers was Cleopatra, the 7th queen of that name, known to history as Cleopatra VII. She was the first of the Ptolemaic rulers to actually learn the Egyptian language, in addition to 9 others. She allied first with Julius Caesar, then with Mark Antony. When Octavian defeated their combined forces at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, and both Antony and Cleopatra died, Egypt became a Roman province. The age of the pharaohs was over. It had lasted, in one form or another, for roughly 3,000 years. We have spent most of this journey with kings. But most people who ever lived in ancient Egypt were not kings. They were farmers. The agricultural cycle governed their lives. When the Nile flooded, the fields were underwater. When the waters receded, leaving behind the dark fertile mud the Egyptians called Kemet, the Black Land, planting began. The harvest came in spring. Then the dry season, and the waiting. During the flood season, when the fields could not be worked, the state mobilized the agricultural workforce for large building projects. Tens of thousands of workers could be fed from state granaries and directed to quarrying and hauling stone for months each year. Egyptian women had a legal status that was, by the standards of the ancient world, unusually broad. They could own property. They could inherit. They could initiate divorce. They could testify in legal proceedings. Compared to women in ancient Greece or Rome, Egyptian women had significant legal standing. Being a scribe was one of the most secure and prestigious occupations. A famous text, the Satire of the Trades, compares the comfortable life of the scribe to the miserable lives of the carpenter, the metalworker, the farmer, and the soldier, and concludes that nothing is better than being able to read and write. Medicine was practiced with a combination of empirical observation and ritual. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dated to roughly 1600 BCE, is a surgical manual that describes 48 cases of injury with a surprisingly clinical eye, examination, diagnosis, treatment. There is no magic in many of its entries. The two approaches, rational and ritual, coexisted, and the Egyptians do not seem to have seen a contradiction between them. The dead were cared for with extraordinary attention. Mummification developed gradually and varied enormously across time and social class. The Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of thought and identity, not the brain. The brain was extracted through the nose and discarded. The body was packed in natron salt, dried, wrapped in linen, and placed in nested coffins. The Book of the Dead, not one fixed book, but a collection of spells personalized for each person, was meant to help the deceased navigate the underworld and reach the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. They believed in continuation. They believed, with great seriousness, that something persisted. Egypt was conquered by Rome. Then Rome divided, and its eastern half became the Byzantine Empire, which was Christian. Then, in 641 CE, Arab armies arrived, and Egypt became part of the Islamic world. It has remained so ever since. The old language survived into the Christian period as Coptic. Coptic Christians in Egypt still use a liturgical form of the language today. It is the last living descendant of the language the pharaohs spoke. Hieroglyphic writing was kept alive primarily by the priesthood of the old temples. The last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved at the Temple of Philae in 394 CE. After that, the knowledge of how to read hieroglyphs was lost. For nearly 14 centuries, the inscriptions on every temple, tomb, obelisk, and papyrus in Egypt were unreadable. The monuments were there. The writing was there. No one could understand it. In 1799, a French soldier in Napoleon's Egyptian campaign found a broken stone near a town called Rashid, known in French as Rosette. The stone bore the same decree inscribed in 3 scripts, hieroglyphs, Demotic, and Ancient Greek. Since scholars could read Greek, they recognized that the stone might be the key to deciphering the others. The major breakthrough came from a French scholar named Jean-François Champollion, who in September 1822 finally cracked the code. He realized that hieroglyphs were not purely symbolic, they represented sounds as well. He collapsed from exhaustion after the realization and had to be carried to his bed. He was 31 years old. After Champollion, the entire written record of ancient Egypt, everything carved into walls, everything copied onto papyrus, slowly became readable again. We have been reading it ever since. And we keep discovering things we did not expect. Workers who complained about their pay. A foreman who called in sick and whose excuse was written down. A woman who wrote to her dead husband asking him to stop haunting her dreams. Love poems. Shopping lists. The Egypt of the pharaohs and the Egypt of the ordinary person exist in the same record, separated only by how carefully we look. 3,000 years of civilization. A culture that built monuments to last forever and then watched many of them disappear anyway. What remains is still more than any single person can read in a lifetime. But some of it has survived, preserved by the dry desert air, sealed in tombs no one opened for millennia. Fragments of a world that was fully human, with all the worry and love and tedium that entails. And somewhere in all of it, in the records of a scribe who took a day off for brewing, or in the will of a woman who left her house to her daughter, is the ordinary hum of a civilization. People doing what people do. Worrying about their children. Trying to do their work. Hoping that something of them would last. Close your eyes again. The Nile is still flowing. The desert is still quiet. The stars above the pyramid fields are the same stars the builders watched, generation after generation, for 3,000 years. Everything changes. And some things, underneath, stay the same. Rest now.